let's call the meeting to order. Lucas texted me back, he said he's gonna be here in a couple minutes, he's got a client that ran long, I believe, so. Okay, minutes of the previous meeting. Do we have any additions or corrections?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second, further discussion on the minutes, additions or corrections? Seeing none, all in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Approval of the agenda. And currently the agenda as read has review and amend the home rule charter, open discussion, and then set the next meeting date. Do we have anything else to add to that? Seeing nothing, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Further discussion. Seeing none, all in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. It's the fruit snacks.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, then we move on to review and amend the home rule charter. The charter was sent out in its current state to everyone. I'm not sure how we want to handle it, if we just want to start at the beginning, or what are everyone's feelings? Just kind of start at the beginning and then work our way back through, or?
Yeah, I would prefer to actually read it through, do a full read through.
Well, and I was going to make mention of something before we get started. I had and I'll let the chairman's here, a citizen from the county called me and said they've been watching the stuff, watching the videos, and they said they can't really tell what's going on in the back of the room with everybody sitting back there.
Oh.
So the only people on camera are the people up here, and the people back there are talking, and they have no clue who's talking about what. So if you would like, I'm not forcing you, but there are chairs up here to sit too.
I didn't just assume that was off limits.
Why would it be?
No.
Chairs. I'm sitting
Kind of
here.
like the altar
Commissioner
at church.
chairs.
Like I said, I'm not gonna force you, I'm just saying that I have
was
that
too
mention
afraid
to
to
get
get too
my.
close to my personal complaint.
Alright.
Yeah, because I'm just making a mention of it because somebody said that to me, that they're like, we wanna know who's saying what back there.
Can we bring our fruit snacks?
Absolutely. And again, everyone, I know I was late last meeting and I apologize that I was late this meeting. I had a client walk in at 1:28 and they absolutely wanted to take care of something right away, so I
That happens to us.
No,
we have fun.
all the chairs got.
Did we approve anything yet?
Minutes and
Agenda?
and then I do up, and then I was just making mention of it. If you guys don't want to come up, that's fine. I'm not saying you have to, I'm just saying that it was mentioned to me by someone.
We would, but there's only 2 chairs and there's 3 of us, so.
Okay.
We have our fruit snacks.
Yeah, we can find
I
it
don't
out.
care, whatever.
I got another one.
I'm not forcing you to be on camera. I mean, you want to be a celebrity, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, I already am.
That's true.
I don't need to be on
By name
camera
only at this
That's
point.
right.
Come on, Rodney, let's go up.
Okay.
Yeah, we need Rodney up here.
Yep. Oh my God, who am I?
Rodney looks glamorous today, so we'll get him up here.
Don't ask him about it either, because we don't want the details.
You don't want to hear my details.
No, I'm fine with the details. I like keeping beef, so I appreciate the work, so we can keep the beef.
Me too, and
Because somebody has to raise the cattle, because I sure don't like it. I like soybean. Awesome. Thank you.
I don't remember what Robert's Rules of Order say about the acting chairperson ceding to the chair, but something cede to the chair, right?
Well, we're co-chairs, I think, aren't we?
Yeah,
So
so.
I'll see to you to run it.
Makes no difference, I just want to know. I think there's something in the Rules of Order, but it doesn't. Okay, so it looks like we've approved the agenda and the minutes. So that would mean the next thing on the agenda is to review and amend the charter. And before we begin on that, I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of you for your dedication and diligence. And the fact that we've even come to the point where we have an initial draft, I think is really something to be kind of amazed with, that we were able to pull that together. And I think that we did a lot of very good work. and a lot of very good discussion that got to this point. And I know that we've got more to go, and we're probably gonna be taking some out and changing some things about it, and I understand that. But I just wanna say thank you all for your work this far. And that I hope that we can continue to diligently and respectfully work on making the best charter we can. So, thanks. So with all of that said, the next item on the agenda is to review and amend the charter. Has everyone had the chance to look at the final initial draft, the finalized initial draft, if that makes any sense at all, with all of the provisions that we laid out? And are there some initial thoughts on that? I imagine that there probably are, and there are some questions about scope and scale that I think it would now be appropriate to have a discussion about.
Okay, I'm gonna lead off. I think that one thing, I've been approached by quite a few people, and they say from what they've heard and read, it's too long. So I would be in favor of making this concise. And two things, there was, when you handed out, I mean, that handout that was at those home meetings, it was the first three things on that thing: freedom to free the budget and additional powers to raise revenue. And I'll go so far as to make a motion that that's as far as we go with this charter at this time, for the simple reason that I don't think we can pass this and to make it simple and concise.
So to clarify, just to make sure that we are all on the same page, you feel that the document is too verbose, we'd like to make it more concise, and that its scope is too broad, and that it would be better if the scope was freedom to budget and also to raise additional revenue.
Those two things.
Okay.
And I guess the different ones brought it up, and they said that they were at that, some of them were at that meeting, and they thought that those first three things they thought would be enough to try it.
Okay.
And I mean, I think I got a good point, and I think that we don't want to have to go to the polls with a lot of reading to do. Just write that into a ballot, and it's either yes or no for them, providing it goes by the county commissioners, and we decide that we can do that. So I appreciate everybody else, and I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rodney.
I was just gonna make mention, I don't disagree with you, Rodney. I think we can make it more concise. We can make it an easier read. Some of the things we have in here, like specifically, what section is it? Let me look. Like the financial procedures section, Article 10. We could easily, instead of including that as part of the home rule charter, remove it and then make it like a commission policy. You know, once it's, you know, we could just make it something as a policy, no different than how we adopt a 5-year road plan and we look at it every year. We could just make it a policy point instead of, and all of a sudden that cuts down a page and a half.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that could easily be, at least in my mind, be taken out and made into a policy point at the commission level, just as an example.
This might make me sound stupid, but don't you already do that?
What, budgeting procedures?
Yes, isn't that the same as what happens now?
To a point, yes, it just delineates it out, number one. Number two here, the difference would be we don't have a capital program.
Oh.
We don't have a 3-year capital program. Like I said, it could be easily be a board policy, no different than how we have a 5-year road plan.
Okay.
Pretty much the rest of it, in all honesty, is a lot of it is,
It's required.
Right.
yeah,
so
it's required. The only thing that would be different is like emergency appropriations and stuff like that. Because we can't do emergency appropriations right now, essentially. So if we wanted to just put in, maybe we could write something that's a lot smaller, that's just a couple, like a paragraph that says, you know, kind of make it more concise. I think we could do some of that and really cut it down easily. The other ones that I made note on, and that I've heard a lot about up to this point, is obviously the elected officials portion of the
I
section.
think we can just eliminate it.
Yeah, I think we could make it a lot more concise simply by, where do you look at Article 4? Everybody that I've talked to wants to keep their elected officials, and they wanna keep it the same as it is. So we could just do it basically, Article 4, you just have Section 1, points 1 and 2, and after point 2, at the end of the intact as elected positions, you just strike that last sentence, and it would be that, basically that 4 sentences, basically, would be the whole thing. You know, then it would just say, we're gonna keep a county commission, it's gonna be 5 people, it's gonna be nonpartisan, it's gonna be at large, all the other officials are still elected. I think that would, you know, obviously make it far more concise. I mean, we'd be cutting some stuff out, plus, I think that's what I've heard from pretty much everybody, they like the idea of keeping officials elected, and I don't have a problem with that.
Otherwise, I look at it, you're taking some of the load away from the people, and we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Well, only if, but, and again, and I'm fine with what Adam said, but it's only if the people choose to take it away from themselves, right? So,
I agree.
I mean, but it doesn't matter, it's neither here nor there, I don't wanna open this can of worms again. All I'm saying is that it's not forcing anything upon anybody, it's giving another option that doesn't currently exist. So, so the way I look at this, we have very little freedom to change or remove, because it's basically boilerplate, Articles 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And the ones that we have significant freedom to change are Articles 4, 5, 10, and 11, in my view. Those are the ones that bear significant, ability to change.
2, 3.
And the reason that I bring that up is to say this, about the length of the document. We could basically strip almost all of the wording out of 4, 5, 10, and 11, and you're still gonna have a 5+ page document. So with respect to trying to get it down to like a 1-pager, we're gonna not be able to legally enforce the document if we make it that big long.
It's gotta be of a certain length, but we could definitely make it more concise, a little less
Maybe a
verbose.
question mark, and this is maybe a dumb question, but on the ballot, it's a summary of this document, correct? Not the entire thing?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, essentially,
That would help.
it'll just be the question of, do you approve of Ramsey County adopting the home rule as was printed,
We
essentially?
put it in the paper though, don't
Yeah,
we?
of course, yeah,
Or
it's gotta be, it's
And it
gotta
has
be.
to go by clear the public hearings too.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. And there'll be adjustments after the public hearing, I'm sure, too, you know? But I think I think, at least in my opinion, it's best to get the document in a form that we best see fit, that the public will accept when it goes to the public hearing. Because that way the people will look at it and go, hey, this is a pretty good document, we like it, maybe a couple little tweaks need to happen. But if there's no huge changes that need to happen and people are, supportive of it as mostly, it's gonna make the ability to pass it probably a little bit easier. And it's something we have to, as a committee, we have to be happy with too, that it still has the things that we think need to function, but it all comes down to, in the end, what the people, the county want, and something we can pass. And like I said, the elected officials portion of it, that's something I've heard time and time again from multiple people, so I think it's they just wanna keep it as is. Well, okay, that's fine, we can easily make some changes there and stuff like that.
So to hop back here, to make sure that I heard you, Adam, because I know we clarified, I think, wrong, at least from my own view. But your view was that we could strip all of Article 10?
I don't think we could strip all of it, but we could easily make it more concise, because like I said, let me look here, I made some notes, but, yeah, see, like section 1, on or before a date established by we basically do that already. It doesn't have to be enacted in a document such as this, it can just be a board policy, because it doesn't change how we're doing business right now. County number 2, we'll publish in the official newspaper, the times and places, copies, but we do that already. It's state statute, and we already have a provision that says anything that's not covered in the document goes by state statute. So why take the time to spell it out if it's already, after the public hearing, the board may adopt the budget with or without amendments. No amendment may increase or decrease expenditures required by law for that service. That's essentially what it is now. There's no change. We can't move up in the budget. We can decrease though.
Can decrease.
So that does read a little different. So if we just struck that, we would still have the complete ability to do what we do now. Revenue certification, that's a state guideline, in the state timeframe, correct?
Yes.
So if again, doesn't necessarily need to be there. The only one I'm looking at that's amendments after adoption is maybe a questionable one. Because supplemental or emergency appropriations or may provide for reductions or transfers pursuant to procedures provided in section 2, which is the powers. You know, for instance, I guess right now, I don't know how it will be treated legally from what we do now, or we maybe use the general fund to do something. But like for instance, when the city needs to pull money from another place, they have to declare an emergency to use maybe a certain amount of dollars to roll it to someplace else. And we don't have that ability right now to a certain extent. I mean,
I can't think of the name of the account.
you know, we just always are like, well, let's take it out of the general because we have a little extra money there. I don't know, that's not necessarily emergency or not emergency, but it's supplemental funding basically. Or, you know, the idea for emergency notes if you had a road problem or something like that because of the flooding, obviously.
You know, and to add to that, can't think of the attorney, Stewart, when I talked with Bill Fahey with the Northland Trust, he gave that information to an attorney in Grand Forks, I believe, and he called and visited with me, and I shared like this information with him, and I never got any email, like he was gonna email me his response back as far as, you know, can we do, you know, what can we do? And I didn't got anything.
Okay, well, what I think it might make sense to do is to go back and reaffirm, I know once we get to Article 4, that's, I mean, I fully expect that we're going to get caught having a discussion about that in a minute. But can we go back to Article 1 and we'll work our way to Article 4 and just reaffirm that in fact, these are the things that we want.
Well, we're keeping Article 1. Because Article 1 is, I thought we'd already decided that was what we're saying in Article 1.
Well, I believe so. I don't believe we can get away with taking it out, but I just want to make sure that we go through it and have everybody on the same page.
So are we voting on each article as we go through them?
Yeah, I think that would be fair. Is that amenable to the committee?
I think it's reasonable.
Yeah.
You know, and then that way we can sort of get a sense for where we want to work on, right? I mean,
Okay.
so the first article,
Can I ask one quick question?
Yeah.
Did we decide that,
Which one?
Steve's attorney,
Carrie.
Carrie, thank you, is she coming to the meeting today?
She's hoping to be.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
I had Candy in my mind. And then I couldn't think of
Candy's
another
here,
word.
yeah.
I know.
It's the same letter, same letter.
Okay, no, I was just curious, 'cause-
But she's had a long day too.
yeah. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
all right, so I'll burn through this. Article 1, commissioners to exercise powers. Subject to the limitations imposed by the North Dakota Constitution, state law, and this charter, the home rule powers of Ramsey County shall be vested in the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of Commissioners shall enact ordinances, resolutions, and regulations to determine policies and prescribe the functions of government to be performed under this charter. All home rule powers of the county shall be exercised in a manner prescribed by this charter, or if the manner is not prescribed, then in such a manner as may be prescribed by ordinance. I think it's fairly boilerplate. I don't think we can get away with not having it. I think it's pretty necessary to be legally enforceable.
Move to accept as is.
There's a motion to accept the
Second.
article. Second. Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Article 2, home rule powers of the county. I apologize, you're going to hear my voice a lot in a second. In addition to the powers granted to the counties under the general statutes, Ramsey County shall have among its enumerated home rule powers, subject to implementation by ordinance or resolution of the Board of County Commissioners, the following: 1. Acquire, hold, operate, and dispose of property within or without the county limits and exercise the right of eminent domain for those purposes. 2. Control its finances and fiscal affairs, appropriate money for its purposes, and make payments of its debts and expenses subject to the limitations of Article 11. Levy and collect taxes, excises, fees, and special assessments for the benefits conferred for its public and proprietary functions, activities, operations, undertakings, and improvements, contract debts, borrow money, issue bonds, warrants, and other evidences of indebtedness, establish charges for any county or other services to the extent authorized by state law, and establish debt and mill levy limitations subject to Article 11. Notwithstanding the other provisions of the subsection, the Board of County Commissioners will not commingle dedicated mill levies with one another or with the general fund levy. 3. Provide for county elected and appointed officers and employees, their selection, powers, duties, qualifications, and compensation, and the terms of county appointment for officers and employees. In addition, a county elected office may not be eliminated or combined with another office except as prescribed in Article 4. 4. Provide all matters pertaining to county elections except as to provide qualifications of electors. 5. Provide for the adoption, amendment, repeal, initiative, referral, enforcement, and penalties for violation of ordinances, resolutions, and regulations to carry out its governmental and proprietary powers to provide for the public health, safety, morals, and welfare. And I ask that we strike morals, and that needs to still be stricken. However, this subsection does not confer any authority to regulate an industry or activity which is exclusively regulated by state or federal law or by rules adopted by a state or federal agency. 6. Lay out or vacate public grounds and provide for the construction, use, operation, designation, and regulation of the county road system. 7. Provide for zoning, planning, and subdivision of public or private property within the county limits, but outside the zoning authority of any city or organized township except wherein that authority is ceded to the county. 8. Exercise in the conduct of its affairs all powers usually exercised by a corporation. 9. Exercise any of its powers or perform any of its functions by contract with or grants from any other government entity or agency.
You're making my eyes hurt watching you read it like that.
I thought I was doing a pretty good job.
I know we're on Article 2 right now, and we're talking about, the levying and collecting of taxes and such. But I look at, after talking with Rodney last time about wanting to just give the commission the authority upon a vote, of course. If you wanted to go after a sales tax and maybe move around a little bit of that money. I went back and I looked at Burleigh counties, for instance, because theirs was pretty specific as well. And their Article 1 states the Board of County Commissioners to exercise powers. Theirs pretty much cuts off after our first sentence. Subject to limitations imposed by the North Dakota Constitution, state law, and this charter, the home rule powers of Burleigh County, which could be Ramsey County, will be vested in the Board of County Commissioners. Ours goes on to state about the Board of Commissioners shall enact ordinances, resolutions, etc., which I think pertains to Article 3. So when we get down to Article 3, if we decide that that's something we want to keep in or not keep in, that's going to change our Article 1. Correct?
Could be Article
Possibly.
2.
Possibly.
So, looking at maybe striking some of the things that are in here along with bringing down the verbiage, there's a possibility going back to Article 1, we get ended after the first sentence.
Possibly. I mean, it really, again, I think at that point, and part of the reason I wanted to go back to the beginning was to, again, get at the heart of what do we feel that we want this document to be or not to be. Because although I respect that we want to make it more concise, to me, it really doesn't matter how long or short it is. What matters is what the scope of the document allows. Sure, if we could say something in 10 words versus 100, we should try. But the question that I see is whether or not we want to say it at all.
Well, the main fear that we're coming across is a scope fear,
Right.
more than how many words is it?
Well,
5,000 versus
Well-
5,000 words, that's...
but here's my fear, we go through, some of it coincides together, and we've just made motions and approved Article 1, which also has to do with Article 3. So
And I don't know how you get away from that. I mean, I think that in a document like this, you're gonna have parts of the document referencing other parts of the document.
sure.
You know,
Well, Article
I
2 is
just-
basically a summary of what everything else is to follow.
I know, and I'm kind of skipping Article 2 right now, I'm jumping ahead to Article 3, which pertains to Article 1. And I guess I wish we could kind of go through this whole document without approving and unapproving each article separately. I'd like to just kind of go through it, figure out what we want to have in it or not in it. I guess I abstain from saying aye to either on Article 1, because I'm not really comfortable right now going over, and we did that the last time, and now we gotta go back, and I don't know, I just,
sure, then let's have a further discussion on it.
and we can go to Article 2, but I would just like the ability, when we get to Article 3, to go back to Article 1. If we're gonna keep Article 3, then okay, Article 1 should stand as it is, but if we are looking at striking out Article 3, well, then it's gonna change Article 1.
Well, sure, and then if we strike Article 2, or Article 4 and Article 11, that's gonna affect Article 2 because it references those.
True.
Yeah, maybe the best option would be just to go through the document, make changes sentence by sentence or whatever, and then at the end, we can make a motion to adopt the thing as a whole.
Sure.
Because then we can always look back and say what affects what, when they go back and strike something if we have to. Because I
You
mean,
said
yeah,
that
there's gonna be
to me.
places that's gonna be, yeah, it's gonna
Sure.
waver back and forth, I mean, that's
Absolutely.
just how it's gonna be.
Thank you.
So like we've already got edits in Article 10 and 11 that aren't seen in Article 2 yet. So we've changed it back there, but we haven't changed it in Article 2. So there's gonna be those conflicts, and that's kind of why we're going through it again. To wipe out some of
Yeah,
that.
right.
There's gonna be conflicts, there's just, and that's why we have to keep looking at it, because we'll probably miss something, I'm sure. It's a lot of stuff, so.
So,
Further discussion on Article 2.
do we want to have the scoping discussion in Article 2 since it's kind of pertaining to it, or is that?
Well, I think at some point we're gonna have it, no matter what,
Because I
whether it
think
happens
this
now or
is
later.
this is a good place to have it just because it is a summary
Yeah.
article, and it's a good point to look at the document as a whole.
Sure, I think that that's perfectly fair. And as such, I think we can use Article 2 as a great, as you've said, point to discuss what we feel is an appropriate scope.
Yeah. So what is that?
What's the appropriate scope? Is that what we're asking?
Yeah.
I guess, I tend to agree with Lucas to the point, there's certain things in here that are pretty much boilerplate that we got. 7, 8, 9. They all have to stay.
They'll have to be at least defined.
Yeah. And they're all pretty just, they're just a paragraph explaining what's going on, basically, there's nothing complicated about them. Just continuance clauses, basically. The changes are gonna happen if we make any art, are they gonna be in, 3, well, 3 is pretty much a standard clause too, it's nothing too complicated about it, it's just how you do ordinances.
Well, is that part of your question though?
Well,
Should we have?
We have ordinance power?
I think we kind of need to, but that would be my,
I mean, right now the county has the ability to do some of that, right?
2, we only have 2 ordinance powers.
Right, but I mean, if you strip
Planning
it,
and alcohol.
but if you strip it entirely,
Well, you'd have to at least put that you have those 2 ordinances, right,
Yeah.
still. But I guess if you stripped it entirely and you didn't say anything about ordinances and resolutions, it would again fall back to state century code.
Right.
So you'd still have that ability. I guess I'm of the opinion that you have to at least have the ability to do ordinance and resolutions just because there's times where they would be useful. And I don't foresee that there's ever gonna be a situation, I shouldn't say that, but where you're gonna get overrun rot with a bunch of ordinances out in the countryside, I don't think. It's more for stuff like the ability to, stick a burn ban on or something like that, where it's not gonna shift back and forth, or, something to that effect. As long as you don't get carried away,
So just thinking out loud here, you make that comment about, and just so you don't get carried away. Let's say 20 years from now, what's gonna stop them from getting carried away?
That's why you have to have the initiative and referral, so you can take an ordinance back.
Exactly.
Right.
And I'm gonna be honest, I know that the initiative and referral section is really long, and maybe we can boil it down and make it more concise, but to me, it's almost a breaking point for me that it has to be in there. Because if we're asking the people to give us additional powers, we have to give them additional powers back to check those powers.
Right.
It's not even a question in my
Yeah.
mind. And if we don't have that in there, I pretty much, I think, have to vote against it.
Well, that's kind of
Because
where
you have to have those powers and give them to the people and say, hey, we're asking you to give us the ability to ask for a tax, we're asking you to give us the ability to ask for an ordinance or a resolution, you have to be able to check our power.
Yep.
Just that
So,
simple.
then the question that I have then, Rodney, is that something that you're comfortable with? Because to my reading of what you said, my understanding of what you said, you don't want initiative or referral.
No, I didn't say that. I just said that, what I said, it's gotta be, when you have an initiative to do that, it's gotta be by the vote of the people.
Sure, but I mean, because and I apologize, but I wrote it down, right? You said you wanted it to be concise, and I'm not trying to drag you through the mud, I'm just trying to understand.
Well, to me, you're dragging me pretty much through the mud. You're not getting what I'm trying to get to you, but I guess I'm gonna leave it at that. Let's the rest of us discuss this. We're going through it.
he's inquiring mainly because we're trying to figure out what exactly you're looking for here, and we value and want your opinion on it. So when you said that you wanted the freedom to budget and raise revenue as the two primary scope items,
Right,
correct?
right.
Is that an exclusion to the referendum and all that? Or are those the only two powers that you want to reference in this document?
That's the only two powers I want in this document.
Okay, because if we do that, then everything else falls out the wayside and we don't have any comment on it.
Well, I guess I don't want it that far, but I want it so that the people have got a chance to come back and vote. And we don't want to take a vote away from the people.
Okay.
I think that's
So then, just to clarify, and again, this is the reason that I ask, is because if we just went with the two things that you said, and then that was it, and that was my understanding of what you said, then that would mean that we would lose the changes to elections, elected officials, which we probably will end up doing, listening to the way that this sits, and that's fine. But the other thing that we would lose is initiative and referral, if we went with the way that I was understanding it. And I don't know how the rest of the board interpreted it, but what we're talking about, I mean, is that what you interpreted it?
That's what we'd also lose Article 3 with the ordinances that would go
Right.
into State Code too, so.
Right, so again.
That's what I was understanding. Did we misunderstand, or?
Well, I'm just going by kind of what people's talked to me about.
Yeah.
And I, as far as referrals and that, if it's gonna take a vote let them bring it to the county commission, or county commissioner bring it to the people.
Okay.
Okay,
Does that sound reasonable?
sure.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm being on,
No, I think you're right on scope, it's just a matter of a question of how do we read it so it's easier more than anything. But you want to keep the power with the people and give them the ability to vote for,
Yep.
so that means
Whatever they want.
Whatever
scope
they
down the
want.
election section, leave the initiative and referendum in, but scope it down as much as we can to make it concise. And probably, what am I looking at? Yeah, and then if we leave ordinance and resolution in, we still have the power to vote against an ordinance and a resolution if we keep that initiative in and referendum, but really try to make it as concise as possible so it reads easy. Because it is kind of long and verbose now, and maybe there's one of these other documents we could look at and kind of scale it back a little bit if we can.
So then, now we're trying to understand where we're at with scope. Now my understanding is that the only thing that it's clear to me that we don't want collectively is Article 4.
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
so.
so then if we strip Article 4, are we all happy? I mean, pretty much, apart from trimming.
Well,
words.
I think 10 as well, was something we
But
should.
I'm saying trimming some of the rest of it, but as far as conceptually, scope-wise, right? Because there's a difference between trimming the words and trimming the scope of the document.
Oh, no, I agree completely.
Right, so scope-wise, the only thing that we agree that, or seem to all want, if I'm understanding this right, is to remove Article 4.
Yeah,
And remove what it says
Remove
now,
about, yeah.
obviously, leave something in there about elected.
In all honesty, of all the feedback I've received, that's pretty much the most feedback I've received is that keep the elected offices as is currently. And I've had kind of a mixed bag on people saying, for instance, the additional ability for taxation, sales tax transfer, something like that. Some people have obviously said, I don't think that's good, but I've had a lot of people say, I think that's a great idea as long as it's structured correctly. Because they like the idea of the ability to raise revenue in another way to pay for something if we have to.
In need, pay for it in need,
Yeah.
by the vote of the people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and so,
Always better.
yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming
I
from.
mean, I guess that's kind of what you gotta,
Yeah.
make that clear so that it's,
Yeah, and that's basically what, all the notes I made when I was going through it was, I think 4, we need to make that change. Conceptually speaking, then the document is kind of where I'm happy with it, to be honest, in front of where, as long as, like I said, we can change,
Right.
the wording and trim stuff and try to get it more concise, but conceptually, if we make that elections change, I'm pretty happy with where we're at, in all honesty.
Sure.
So I agree, but do you really need to read it article by article to get to that point though?
No, but I think we do need to go through because there's gonna be places where, say we trim 4 or we take some stuff out of 10 where it's not gonna jive with 2 or 3, and we gotta make sure that everything works together.
See, because if you get rid of part of 4, then in subsection 3, there's something about.
Right, so again, we're gonna have to keep coming back to this stuff until it all gels.
Yeah.
So,
That's why we're having this discussion now
Either
in
that or
Article
just-
2 is so, because that's kind of the scoping article.
And the only other thing I'll bring up, and I guess maybe I didn't catch it the first time we went through it, but it says notwithstanding in most of the documents,
I'm sorry, where?
it would be the bottom of number 2 on Article 2, so page 1 of our document that we have. And most of the documents, the other home rules I looked through had this, it says notwithstanding the other provisions of the subsection, the Board of County Commissioners will not commingle dedicated mill levies with one another or with the general fund levy. So I don't quite understand from a legal aspect what that means, because essentially,
Wasn't there something in the century code that you couldn't commingle like the property taxes for school
Yeah.
set aside with your general fund and something along those lines? I think that's what it's referring, but
Right, my interpretation of what it's saying is that you can't commingle funds for any purpose not listed. Right, so any reason that we don't list for potential to change the budget, you can't do it.
but we can still take a mill levy from one other location and use it for
Correct.
something else, like we do now, where we have to overtax the general to pay for the jail or whatever.
Correct.
But we just can't say, hey, that 4 mills over there that's supposed to be for weed control is now in the general, and we can't just arbitrarily do that ourselves.
Right.
Is what it's saying, okay, yeah, just a clarity issue, because I was reading it going, what? But it still gives us the flexibility to move things around if need be.
Sure. So let's flag number 3, subsection 3 of Article 2, because we're gonna need to revisit that after we've talked about Article 4. So it doesn't make sense to change it if we don't know how we're gonna change Article 4, so let's flag that. Candy, there was a motion made a couple of times ago on subsection 5, and I remember because I made it, to strike morals. And
Yeah,
I'd like
That was
to
stricken.
see that stricken,
yeah.
because like I said, I don't think that it's the purview of government to define morality. Or at least not local government, I don't know. Federal government tries a lot.
That's,
Okay, so, and then we don't have to take a vote on this. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me the way that we do it, I just think we need to go through step by step and look at it all again.
Maybe just to refresh my memory part here, but mill levy under, okay, Article 2, subsection 2, bottom area on page 1 here. Mill levy limitation subject to Article 11.
Oh,
I honestly don't remember, does that part need to be updated, or pretty sure we had decided not to
I
set
thought we
mill
said
levy
that.
limit.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
yeah.
Yeah, cause we didn't set a mill levy limit, and a lot of them will set a mill levy cap on, across the board, we didn't do that, so yeah, if we don't wanna set that limit, then we would have to remove that verbiage, yeah, you're right.
Okay, so let's update that.
Because the limitation section of Article 11 just says,
You want
Yeah.
eliminate from established debt and mill levy limitations to.
Yeah,
Yes.
we don't have a
That
limit.
sentence there.
The last, yeah, that last
Not,
clause.
not the last sentence, but the one.
Last clause, so and mill levy limitation subject.
Yeah,
to
so it'll just
Article
be and established debt, period, and then strike and mill levy limitations, yeah, cause we didn't put a limitation in. Cause, you know, I think since we pulled that from another county, obviously, in those counties, their mill levies are so much bigger that they put a cap on it because
Yeah.
they don't have to go to 105 mills or whatever to get what they need, because, what did I see the other day, Ward County's mill levy is, I think a mill for the county is like $400,000 or something like that. It's pretty big,
Wow.
you know, and they can obviously perform the tasks under, for a lot less mills than we can, just because we don't have as much, you know, taxable valuation in the county. Okay, so do we need to make a motion to remove that then?
Do we wanna do individual motions and approvals?
I'd prefer not at this point.
Okay, but just flag it basically to come back after we finish the document.
Flag it top.
Okay, I'll make a star next to it.
Because realistically, this scoping part is more of what do we want it to look like, not what individual words are,
Yep.
are here or not.
Okay.
Maybe a scoping observation at this point. Right now, it looks like we're all in agreement that budget, ordinance, tax, and referral are the 4 items that we're really seeking in this document, correct?
Seems that way, yeah.
So you said, yeah,
Or
budgets,
changes or, yeah.
ordinance, tax and
Budget,
yeah,
ordinance, tax, and referral.
would be additional powers, and then elections would stay the same.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just wanting to make sure that we're all level set on that's what we want this document to look like.
To
'cause-
provide for as additional powers.
Yeah,
I
Because
know,
that's-
that's pretty much right in scope of where I was thinking.
depending on who you talk to,
I-
at least 3 of those are hot button issues, so.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, I don't think we could possibly write the document without having hot button issues, because I mean, it's, you know, but the whole point of the document is to draft something that is usable, something that's
Yeah.
easy to understand to a point, and something that you can show the people and say, hey, you might not like it, you might like it, I don't know, I'm not trying to sell it to you, just gonna tell you what it'll do, and see if it's something people like or if they don't like, and that's, I guess the goal.
I'm kind of using this opportunity to say, is this more or less what you guys are hearing that you're wanting? Is it what you think is responsible, et cetera? I'm not trying to take a position on it right now, but
Oh, you're just trying to hear what
I
have
just-
we heard from the public?
I just want to level set among the committee here
Yeah.
to say that, okay, we aren't overrunning someone's idea of what this should look like as far as scope goes. We're all good?
No, that's exactly where I'm at.
Yeah, because I would, gotta get it down to where it's.
Okay. Okay, that's all I was looking for, thank you.
Would you be willing to make that as a motion?
Sure.
That those be the powers that is sort of,
Power.
because otherwise I'm afraid
Powers of
that-
focus.
Right, that in the future, we're gonna have a big argument again about something little again, and it'll be a problem.
All right, so I moved that this budget, ordinance, they call it income, tax, or taxes, and referral powers be the powers of focus for this document.
Okay, is there a second?
I'm just trying to look at everything and make sure we're not missing something.
Everything else is pretty much status quo or boilerplate.
So we've got,
Did you say budget, ordinance, tax?
think it was income.
So what would count, okay, before,
His taxes.
yeah, before seconding, what would you count as a budget then? Just the flexibility to budget and not like the financial procedures section, correct?
Right, budgetary flexibility.
Budgetary flexibility,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that, I'll second.
Okay,
I include that as kind of part of the freedom to budget.
Yeah.
Neither here nor there.
No, that's fine.
okay, so there's a second, motion and a second? Did you second that, Mike?
Yes, I did.
Okay. All right, there's a motion and a second, further discussion. Any other changes or revisions to the scope or scale of this document that any of the members feel necessary or appropriate? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting that scope and scale signify by, no, Candy, can I get a roll call?
We'll do that.
Okay. So, okay, hold on. I was like, I can't do this like I do commissioners.
God, making it tough on her.
I
Yeah,
apologize.
Seat 1, 2, 3, 4.
yeah, no, I just do the first letter, I can't. Okay.
Good point.
Okay, Susie,
Start with
that was good over here.
yeah,
Paula,
aye.
Lucas,
Aye.
Rodney,
I guess I,
Aye.
yes?
yeah,
Okay.
aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Dakota.
Aye. Hey, hey. Excuse me.
Thank you, Candy.
Yeah.
Sorry for the,
No, well,
Candy
I'm glad I'm
can
the only one
just-
that puts up my notes.
Well, it's a different flavor.
Yeah,
You have to replenish.
there's all kinds
It's
of,
like,
Look.
oh, it's even lower.
Okay, so are there any other changes then to Article 2? Or are we comfortable talking about Article 3 now?
yeah, I think I'm comfortable with that. I think we pretty much have the scope out.
Is there, and my only question is if we're looking to make things a little bit more concise, with Section 1 definitions, is there any other place that has a regular or accepted definition for ordinance and resolution? Because if so, I don't know that we would need to repeat it here.
That's good.
You need a copy?
Yeah, I've got an extra
You
copy.
have an extra copy?
I'd rather keep it in here at this point, just for clarity, and that way you go to 120 to look.
Sure, and that's totally fine with me. I just am trying to, because I actually think
Yeah.
writing a longer document can make it a lot more sensible than a shorter document, a lot less.
As long as
Question
it's
of
not too
what's
much
going on.
bouncing around, but yeah,
Right.
I'd rather have one.
That's
place
fine,
to
but I
look.
just thought if we were trying to make it concise, I had to bring that up, because I think that's a sensible
good idea.
place to cut.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with defining them.
No, I think that is a good idea. So
Yeah.
when people are looking at it, they understand.
An ordinance is permanent,
Yeah.
resolution is temporary. Straightforward.
Okay. The only other decision that I think that we made specifically was how long we gave the official newspaper,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
20 days. That's still what we all felt was appropriate.
I'd be fine with that. I know, Candy had a big part in that discussion with the new changes when, so I don't know, what is it, 3 days now before you have to have it in,
Yeah,
something like that,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, I think we made that distinction to make sure that there was enough time,
yeah.
so.
And it provides for basically a full month of review.
Mhm.
for
Yeah, we
people.
wanted to make sure there was enough time for people.
And we're gonna end up touching on that again when we get to initiative and referral.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. And then, section 3, I think is required. I mean, like, we basically need that to say that obviously none of it can supersede.
And that's one of the specific things that was brought up at the meetings about making sure that we have something in there that says townships retain all the authorities they have currently. And I think that's just helps make the document stronger.
Okay, we good to go to Article 4 then, elections? Okay. I would entertain a motion to strike everything after section 1 subsection 2 and change section 1, subsection 1 to conclude by saying treasurer, recorder, auditor, sheriff, and state's attorney shall remain intact as qualified. Does that make sense? So
Strike everything else.
to include that within the first part, to describe what officers are to be elected, and then to strike the rest.
I'll make the motion that we strike everything, after, in section 2, bullet point 2, after elected positions, we'll just make a period there. So it would read, the elected offices of county treasurer, recorder, auditor, sheriff, and state's attorney shall remain intact as elected positions,
Where are we at?
period. And then strike the rest of the
The
section,
rest of it is stricken?
the rest of the article, I should say.
Yes.
Yeah, strike the rest of the article.
I'll second that motion.
There's a motion and a second, all those,
So is that saying, so there isn't section 2, it's all under section 1?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so section
I'm
1
sorry,
will,
that was my clarification.
yep, yeah, so in all honesty, section 1 can probably just be, can
Right,
be
just be
stricken as well
elected.
at the same time.
Right.
That section 1 offices to be elected can just be stricken and can just say number 1 and number 2 under Article 4.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's fair.
Would you include in that motion and in your second to change the title of Article 4 then to be offices and elections?
Oh,
So then that way,
I'm fine with that.
because it's only going to refer to
Yeah.
offices, so
What would you like it to read?
offices and elections.
I think that's fair.
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I screwed up your motion.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
We have a
All
motion
right,
second,
did
so
you
discussion time.
second it?
No, I didn't, I did.
Oh, okay, so we got a motion and a second. Are you comfortable with seconding that, Shane?
Mhm.
Okay. All right, so there's a motion, second, further discussion?
Well, we're on section 2, under elections.
Yeah, that's all being stricken.
yep, that's all gone.
Strike the whole thing.
Section 2, okay.
Would you like me to read it, Rodney, just for the clarity of it?
I would, because I got,
Okay, so basically it would say Article 4, offices and elections. Number 1, the Board of County Commissioners shall consist of 5 members who shall be elected by nonpartisan ballot. All the candidates seeking the offices of county commissioner shall be voted on by qualified electors. Number 2, the elected offices of county treasurer, recorder, auditor, sheriff, and state's attorney shall remain intact as elected positions, period.
End of Article 4.
End of Article 4. Clear, concise, it says we're doing it the exact same way we're doing it now.
Okay, further discussion?
I'll move that we adopt that part of it.
Oh, wait, sorry,
No, it's-
we got a motion, wait a second.
Right, no, I just wanted to make sure there was no further discussion before I call the roll. Well, hearing no further discussion, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. We prepared to go on to Article 5?
Yeah, would you like a cup of coffee?
No, that's all right, thanks.
We're
I
gonna check
got a
one
pop. Or an iced tea.
There you go.
It's summer now, you're supposed to drink iced tea.
You're optimistic, I like it.
Okay, has anyone's thoughts changed with respect to the different parameters we set for initiative and referendum? To refresh your memory, we wanted to make it harder to initiate than to refer. In other words, to say that it should be easier for the people to call into question the decisions of the county commission than to make new decisions themselves. Does that make sense?
Again, my only question would be, and this would be a question for Candy more than anything, is there a place in state statute that lays out initiative and referendum? I'm not sure that there obviously is. But does it lay it out just for the state purposes or for local government purposes as well? Because for instance, we have a pretty long section. And some of them, like, what county am I looking at, Headinger, it's a paragraph. I mean, I'm just for the question. It doesn't lay out the specific, this many days, this many things, this is what it reads type of thing. That's why I'm questioning, is there a standard format that the state adheres to? Because then you could basically take out all the other stuff other than saying you need this many this many signatures and all that.
I think that this probably, because it's something that the citizenry interacts with or is expected to interact with and they abide by, rather than the commission or the government, I think this is the one thing that really should be laid out very explicitly
And very,
in the document.
Okay.
So that anybody that refers to it knows exactly what the requirements are. But,
No, and I'm fine with that, I'm just bringing it up because, you know, we were having the discussion about, you know, trying to make it concise, you know, how much, you know, how verbose do we wanna be, you know? But I like laying it out too, just because then there's no question about how it's gonna be handled, how it's gonna be done, the timeframes and everything like that, it's all there, you know? Because my only concern would be is if there isn't something in state statute that says specifically this is how local governments are supposed to do it, then you would have the question of when it happened, well, what's the time frame? Well, you know, you could get a lawsuit on your hands saying, well, you're not doing it right, or there's no way that's prescribed to do it type of thing. So that's why I just wanted to bring it up.
well, and there's a layperson going to read century code as you know that from, especially when it refers you to different spots. I'd rather look at one document.
It's an exciting thing.
And to answer your question,
You don't know, okay.
I'd have to,
Well, yeah, and I would assume that they probably don't have a specific section laid out for local government on how to do that. They just sit, I would guess in the home rule documentation area, it just says that that's a power that can be given to the counties or the cities.
I'd also entertain a motion to strike the note.
Yeah.
the note,
Yeah.
right there, okay?
It essentially says exactly what I said earlier. If we're gonna ask for additional powers, the people need to check the powers. Do you want a motion for that? I'll make a motion to strike that note section.
So, or seconded,
Which part now?
this note.
Yeah, it was in from the original document.
There's this. This not authoritative.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Any further discussion on Article 5? Let's move on to Article 6. So all that Article 6 says is basically is if you put it to an advisory vote of the people, your ordinance and it passes, it can't be then referred. Right? Which makes sense. It's basically asking for if it would be a very controversial thing and you know it's going to go before a vote, probably, you can refer it first, find out what the will of the people is. I don't think it'll ever happen, but I do think that it's reasonable.
No, but there are certain counties that they have used that ability to ask for an advisory vote just to see what the people think more than anything, so you know what the thought is out in the countryside. I don't think it's a bad idea.
Sure. No, I think it's fine.
I like the idea of just asking for an advisory vote on, you know, if it's a really critical issue and you don't know
Right.
which way you're gonna go, I think an advisory vote is a good idea.
So say we all.
Silence, right?
Glad somebody got the reference.
Any further thoughts on Article 6, or do we feel comfortable leaving that as is and continuing on to Article 7?
That's pretty much the way it stands right now then, isn't it?
Well, not how it stands now currently, because I mean, we don't have the ability, at least don't quote me on that, I don't think we have the ability to ask for an advisory vote right now.
I really don't see the need for one. I think I should scratch it myself, but
So shall we?
I really don't, I think it bogs it down. I think that's just another thing that's unnecessary in the charter, but that's my view on it.
Okay.
I mean, if you don't, well, I really don't, why, and give me an instance where you feel it's necessary. It's something necessary.
I've seen it used in a couple different situations. Just when maybe it was an ordinance and you didn't know how everybody felt about it, you ask about it. I know Griggs County has used it in the past for something that they can't even do legally, about getting out of the Garrison Diversion Conservancy District. They've asked for advisory votes on that 2 or 3 times just to see where the feel of the people is, so that they're on the right course type of thing. I'm not saying it's a necessary thing, I'm just saying they have used it that way. I know, I believe it's Steele County's charter says they can't do any ordinance or resolution without a previous advisory vote. Essentially, something to that effect, I can't remember the exact verbiage of it, but. I mean, like you said, it's not necessary, by any stretch of the imagination, but.
And I guess because we are looking at ways of cutting it down, if this is an unnecessary one, then maybe that's something then that we should, you know, think about not keeping in the things that are really important to keep in there.
Sure. The only time that I could see a lot of value in it is if a group of individuals came before the commission and asked for an ordinance of some kind. And that the commission itself had no strong feelings either way, but really didn't know if there was some part of this ordinance that would affect something that they didn't think it would. Then they wanted to ask the community. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like something like, you know, I don't know, maybe it would be an ordinance where we would say that only the most trafficked roads are we gonna do mag water on. Some kind of ordinance for that, something like that. And we don't know. You know, it would save us money and whatever, but we don't know if people really care about the mag water or not. I mean, just something stupid like that.
Yeah.
Where then that way, we wouldn't have to then have the community get up, you know, up in a big riot if they really cared about the mag water to then come back and refer it rather than just having decided first.
Is there a reason that we can't just put this in the same, in Article 3? Because that's what it's more or less tackling, unless I'm missing something.
Right, that's
As a section, as a subsection?
As a subsection,
or
or
just put it,
boil it down to
Yeah.
kind of more just the advisory vote part, because I see the value in the commission having the ability to put something on a ballot without it being
and
ironclad.
and it's just the fact that I don't see it coming up often enough to convolute this charter in the way that we would need to put it in. Myself, you know, that's my view, but I guess you guys can decide how you want to do it. And what are some other thoughts, I guess?
No, I mean, I think that's a perfectly valid view to have. I mean, it just,
I guess I'll put it this way, if it's in there, I'm fine with it, if it's not like a breaking point to me, and I'm like, oh, we have to have that. I mean, I think it's valuable to a point, but I do agree with you that it probably won't be used much. I mean, I can't foresee where it's gonna be used.
So this looks like great amendment material.
Maybe it's, when this thing come to be, it was talked about giving tools. I can't see that this is part of a tool that we want to work with.
Okay.
Well, just to keep things moving, I'll make a motion that we just start that.
I think there's been a motion to strike Article 6.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? I guess hearing no discussion, I'll just weigh in. I can see it potentially being valuable, and I don't feel like it takes up very much room. I don't think it's very complicated, at least personally. So I'm going to vote against it, striking it. I think it's fine, but I understand why everybody has the view they have, and I respect that too. Any further discussion?
I guess my main, not really concern with it, but understanding of the concern is that it's just one more thing to try and explain as we put this document to the people. which, I get it, I don't necessarily agree that that's such a big hurdle, but, like I said before, I mean, this, if the need ever were to arise, this would be a great amendment to the document, so. If we do lose it, it's not anything big deal to me.
Well, I'm not ranting and raving, right? I'm just saying I'm gonna vote against it, so.
Yeah.
Further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of removing Article 6 signify by saying aye.
I
Opposed?
Aye.
Appears that the decision to remove Article 6 passes.
I voted to keep it in the document, yes.
Okay.
I voted against the motion.
Article 7, probably legally speaking, the most important provision of the entire document.
move to keep it in there.
Yeah, I think it looks the same.
No, there's no harm done anyplace there.
It's essentially saying if we screwed something up and the court finds that we screwed something up, the rest of the document is still valid, it's just, that section is no longer good. Which I don't think we do, but I can understand the logic of what we do.
Kinda like if your car gets a flat tire, you don't have to replace the car.
Exactly, that's
Or
the best.
the other three.
Yeah. You might have to replace 2 tires.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Oh, second.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of continuing to hold Article 7, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Article 8.
I think you have to have it. It's pretty much boilerplate that says if there's any civil proceedings against the county, they remain intact, or if the county has civil proceedings, it says it. And the only thing I would say is, resolutions and policies, maybe we should say all county, because we don't have any resolutions currently. Maybe we should change resolutions to ordinances, because we do have ordinances enforced. Because resolutions are something we can't do right now. And so that way the planning and zoning, once it's adopted, will be enforced, because that way we don't have to go try to re-adopt it again.
Right.
As well as the liquor license stuff, because we went through that just a couple of years ago, so that's all updated as well. We don't have to go back through that process again then.
So instead of using resolutions, you wanna use,
I think section 4 should be ordinances and policies to remain enforced, and then all county ordinances and policies in that second line. Because resolutions are something we don't have the right to do, so. And those are the only 2 ordinances we can do.
Is that a motion, Adam?
Yeah, I'll make that as a motion to change the words.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to replace the word resolutions with the word ordinances. Any further discussion?
I'm hoping planning and zoning will be done by then. I'm sure Dan agrees.
Yeah.
We've been working on it for a
As
while.
long as it comes, it makes sense, it's okay.
Okay. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Article 9, amendments and repeal.
And I guess I have no problem with any of that, I think that's reasonable. It sets the guidelines just like off the referendum and the initiative. It says how many signatures you need, and it says that you can only do it at, a general or a primary election, only every 2 years, so that we don't have a special to do it basically. So we're not incurring a bunch of cost. People want to get rid of it.
I move that we keep it as is.
Motion, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Alright, motion and a second, any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Article 10. Adam, I think you probably are the one to ask about what you want to strip from this.
That's where I'm looking at it, seeing what do we need and what don't we need. I mean, what are the feelings, I guess, of everyone? Do you think it's reasonable to pare it down? Do you think it's reasonable to keep it in?
Well, and I guess I'm not familiar with the financial procedures right now as far as the century code is concerned, but what in here right now is governed by the state, and what in here is in addition or different than what is already stated by state law?
I can tell you with best the knowledge I have. Basically, in that section 1, that would be all an arbitrary guideline that's set by the county commission. So how we budget usually is we say to all our department heads, here's where our cost of living is. We're gonna look at, submit your budget at this and we need it by July 1st or whatever when we start budgeting. So that's just an arbitrary thing we set,
Okay,
just so we can get started early enough in the budgeting process.
okay.
That 3-year capital program, like I said, we don't have anything we do with that right now. We just have the 5-year road plan. On number 2, that's all state stuff, at least on the beginning of section 2. We have to put where you can find the document, that you can come pick all the budgetary stuff up at the auditor's office. You have to give the guidelines on the times, all that kind of stuff. That's all state.
So
And
we
then when the
have,
public hearings get.
okay, so basically we have to say in a document somewhere that, like for instance, number 2, the time and place, not less than 2 weeks after publication. So that would have to stay in there, because we have to stipulate.
No, it doesn't have to stay there, because that's state statute.
Oh, that is state
Yeah,
statute.
state statute states that we have to do it, we have to have it public noticed so
Oh, okay.
ahead of time, we have to send out certain things to people telling them what the procedures are for the budgeting and all that kind of stuff. That's all spelled out in century code.
I see.
And part of that is, it moved up a month this year because we have to have that initial, I don't remember what it's called. Truth and taxation notice or whatever their technical guideline term is for it, but yeah, we have to send out a thing earlier this year, so that's all basically, then that second paragraph in there, it says, after the public hearing, the county commissioners may adopt the budget with or without amendments. That's stipulated under century code now. That second line, the no amendments may increase or decrease expenditures, that is not what century code says. Century code says we can't increase from the budget that is proposed to the people, but we can cut from that budget. So generally speaking, when we budget at the county commission level, we set the budget, we set it on the high end, and then we can pare back from there. But we can never go higher than that budget that's put out there, that's publicly noticed, and at the hearing, but we can always go down. And we've done that, I think, probably every year since I've been on the commission. We always try to shoot high so people know the high end, and then we cut down from there. So I don't quite understand why you wouldn't want to have the ability to decrease, because I guess it says required by law or for debt service, I guess. So that makes sense to a point. But, okay, yeah, I'm reading it wrong. That's my fault. That makes sense. That's essentially states exactly what we can do now.
Right.
Yeah, because I didn't read it on. I'm sorry. I apologize. A revenue certification. That's, I believe, state guideline. Section 4, that's where I don't have necessarily the clarity on. I think that section might be something that could be useful. Section 5, lapse of appropriations at the end of the year. That's pretty much self-explanatory, I guess. An appropriation for a capital expenditure will continue in force until expended, which is pretty much common. And the administration of the budget item. The Board of County Commissioners will provide by resolution the procedures for administering the budget. That, we have the ability to do resolutions if this passes, so essentially we would just set a resolution like in June saying how the budget procedures are gonna work for the year. Would be
Yeah,
nice
but I think-
if we wanted to.
Right, but it's not may, it's will. So that's the important part.
Yeah,
is that
yeah.
we have to have a resolution governing how we use the budget.
Yeah.
Right, so that actually I think is.
Yeah, that's a key thing, I agree with that, yeah, it's will instead of may, which I honestly don't have a huge problem with, but we've never had a difficulty with agreeing at the commission level how we're gonna budget, it's kinda just, oh, this is, alright.
Right. I mean, is it
Candy keeps us
possible,
on task.
is it possible then for us to say, basically to summarize sections 1, 2, 2, and 3, basically in such a way as saying, we'll follow the guidelines as stipulated by North Dakota State Century Code. So, with respect to the submission of a budget by a Board of County Commissioners, with respect to official notice, with respect to amending the budget and certification of revenue, all of those, because then we could potentially just have it as one section. Right? And just say, as governed by state, North Dakota State Century Code, if we're listing it out again.
And that's more of an internal type of working thing, so I don't see the need to have restate state code there.
No.
No, there's no need to duplicate it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Okay. It's an option, maps, administration. Excuse me. I'm just looking at other copies here to see how they deal with it. I mean, we can make a statement that we're just gonna follow North Dakota Century Code, but I mean, pretty much, I don't even know if we have to include that, because the document states that in lieu of writing something, state century code is enacted.
Pretty much Article 10 is all taken care of under state
Yeah,
statute.
essentially, yeah.
Yeah,
The
so,
the only portion of it that we could keep is saying that every year when we budget, we have to have the commission has to have a resolution saying how we're gonna do it. I mean, but I honestly don't see the reason to do that, simply because it's pretty much what we do now. We just don't have an official resolution, I guess.
well, if there is any rebuttal to it, they have to come before the county commission, so that would take care of that too.
Yeah. Like I said, the only thing I have a question about is that section 4 where it says the supplemental or emergency appropriations.
Yeah.
You know, because part of that comes down to the flexibility in the budgeting. Because if you have the ability, say you had another emergency where a road went underwater or something and you had to do something quickly, you would have the ability then to do certain things, I think, comparatively to what you would have without it in the document.
So Hedinger County has, they have it as a subsection just listed as budget. The Board of County Commissioners will prepare a budget which provides in fiscal terms and in terms of work programs an outline of the proposed financial policies of the county for the ensuing fiscal year. The budget will provide a complete financial plan of all the county funds and activities for the ensuing fiscal year except as required by law or this charter.
Yeah, it's like section 3 under Morgan
Yeah.
counties as well.
So could
Will
you
be,
just-
will be in a form as the Board of County Commissioners may require.
May
That's
require.
essentially what we're doing right now.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
I
know,
guess,
but to,
I had summarized sections 1, 2, and 3 basically in a single sentence, which would be one section saying, the Board of County Commissioners shall, as provided by North Dakota law, submit and publish an annual budget, amend the budget, and certify revenues. Right? Because then, then that would cover the first 3.
We do lose the capital expense program and.
Yeah.
Which is a valuable tool just from a wisdom standpoint,
What are you referring to now?
the 3-year plan. So we
Oh.
do the 5-year plan with roads.
Sure. And I like the idea of a 3-year capital program included in the budget. But I think that that's something that would be just as appropriate for the county commission to pass a resolution stating they'll do that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking too, to a portion, because if you stipulate only a 3-year capital plan, or capital program to be submitted with the budget, what happens if maybe it's worthwhile having a 5-year plan, or a 7-year plan? And the commission goes, hey, maybe we should be looking out a little further in the future, and then the document says it has to be a 3-year plan.
Well,
You could write in at minimum a 3-year plan or something like that,
3-year plan.
but,
But I'm
Just
just
have
saying, it
flexibility.
would just as easy to have as a resolution later on.
and I think it's
Yeah.
something we should, again, like I said, as a board policy, we should do anyway, because then we'll have a lookout for saying, okay, what's this department gonna need for capital improvements this year, next year, the year after, so we can start to plan, so we're not kinda doing this with the taxation, we can kinda try to keep it a little more level. You know, there's a lot of things that are out of our control, you know.
Right.
You know, the state comes in 19 and goes to the legislative session, and whatever happens with taxes and whatever is gonna really affect what we do locally. But we can try to do everything that's best in our ability to try to keep things as equal as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Well, the ideal scenario is any sort of capital expense, you would have a life cycle replacement plan for it.
Yeah.
That would be the ideal scenario. Now, whether that's workable is another question.
Yeah, and it's not always perfect. You know, like this last year in the budget, we determined we needed a new deputy. Well, along with the new deputy comes outfitting a new deputy as well as buying a car for a new deputy. Well, there wasn't gonna be a 3-year plan ahead of time to look that out, because it just comes with the amount of workload that is required of the department.
But now that part of his hire, you should have.
But now that the car's there, yes,
A replacement
there should
plan
be a
for the vehicle.
specific plan written out for when we'll be replacing what, and, you know.
Yeah, I mean, in principle, I absolutely agree. I
Okay.
think that that's really important. I just think that, again, if we're talking about making this a concise document that's not bogged down with all these different things, that would really be something I think that could just be done as a resolution.
Okay, well, it's not something that worries me with the current commission, so if it does come up, it's a good amendment for later.
Could you reread that, please?
Sure. So basically, what I would suggest is that we replace current sections 1, 2, and 3, seeing as they list what's there in Century Code already, to say, the Board of County Commissioners shall, as provided for in North Dakota state law, submit and post an annual budget, amend the budget, and certify its revenues.
Can we throw section 6 in there too?
And administer it.
Yeah,
Amend, so then to say amend and
administered by resolution.
Okay.
So in other words, to say, the Board of County Commissioners shall, as provided for by North Dakota state law, submit and post an annual budget, amend and administer the budget, and certify its revenues? Is that what you're saying?
We're missing the resolution part. That's more or less what I was getting at, is there just a way to combine it?
So you wanna have.
Not necessarily one sentence,
Yeah,
but
you wanna have the commission then pass a resolution saying this is how we're gonna budget
Yeah.
and that every year.
yeah. Because that's part of that accountability, we're not gonna have the 3-year.
administer
the 3-year
budget.
Yep, I'm trying to bring that up and just,
Bring number 6, section 6.
yeah.
Can we leave that as a separate section? I think, to me, that would make the most logical sense to leave that.
Section 6
Okay.
in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so just make it whatever it's gonna end up.
Right, so
Probably
yeah,
section
because
4 or whatever,
basically,
yeah.
you'd kill section 1, 2, 3, potentially we'd have 4, potentially we'd have 5, and then we'd have 6 still. But I think 6 is important to leave as its own provision.
okay,
just personally.
I was just thinking we could combine it with the previous one under the same heading, but that works too. I'm indifferent. Just thought it was an easy way to summarize.
And the only reason why, to clarify my own thinking on it, is because sections 1, 2, and 3 are already what's stated in
Yeah.
century code, but section 6 is not what's stated in century
Fair
code.
enough.
And so to me, I would like it listed, 'cause it's different.
So what would you call the section then, if you're gonna have that as section 1? Budgeting procedures or something like that?
Sure. Yeah. Do we want to keep what's current section 4? Well, let me start by saying, is there a motion to do that, or do we feel that that's not appropriate?
It's appropriate, it needs a new name.
Stop,
Candy.
Okay, just trying to write this down, okay?
stop. Go back. Rewind.
To where?
Okay, so we're taking 1, 2, and 3,
Well, yeah, we're discussing
and we're
doing that.
combining,
We're discussing doing that.
yeah.
Into the
That's-
one sentence that Lucas stated.
But she needs to get caught up.
Yeah.
That's fine, we'll give,
Yeah.
we'll chill for a second.
Well, but yeah, before we make, just to clarify, is that something we'd be interested in doing? Before we make
Yeah.
Candy write it all down?
I'm fine with taking 3 paragraphs out and making it one sentence.
Yeah.
Because like we've talked about, making it concise, that's a good way to do it.
And if
And
we're
that
going-
one sentence says everything that those other ones say.
Okay, is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second, and then Candy, do you want me to read it? I'll read it very slowly if you want to write it.
I've got the Board of County Commissioners shall, as provided by state law.
As provided, yeah, as provided for by state law.
Oh,
By
yeah, for by
As
state.
provided for by North Dakota state law, submit and publish an annual budget. Comma, amend and administer the budget, comma, and certify its revenues, period.
Okay, repeat after administer the budget, comma.
And certify its revenues. Will you read that back when you're done?
Lots of translation.
Yeah, I was like, okay. So we're taking 1, 2, and 3, and we're putting it into the Board of County Commissioners shall, as provided for by North Dakota state law, submit and publish an annual budget, comma, what's that word? Amend?
Amended and
Oh,
administer the
yeah.
budget.
I forgot a few letters, but amend and administer the
Shorthand.
budget, comma, and certify its revenues,
Perfect,
period.
I like it.
perfect. So there's a motion and a second to replace all of that. Is there any further discussion?
Sounds good.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Do we want to keep section 4 and retable it section 2?
Do you have to change, is that changed now with the wording of section 2? Or it's a
Yeah, but
pursuant
instead of
to
referencing
section-
section 2, it's
Yeah.
gonna reference section 1.
Was provided in North Dakota Century Code. Or that would be-
Well, you could just
Or
read
what
it
is
up,
it?
or provide for reductions in transfer procedures.
Everything that we motioned before, wouldn't that just become section 1?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was
Right,
thinking.
yeah.
Just turn section 2 into section 1. Because it's just basically saying, after you go through all the procedures in section 1, then if need be, you can amend or adopt for emergency. And I think it comes back to the same question that we've had previously is, for instance, when the flood was going on in the 90s, when they needed to bond for road projects, were those bonded as emergency bond debt, or were they bonded under, budgeting? So like if the road was in trouble in 94, they budgeted for 95 to do the road. How was that handled? Because we don't have the ability to do emergency bond debt currently, I don't believe. Please don't quote me on that, but
I don't-
that's how I understand it.
I mean, I was here.
Because it would allow for more flexibility, basically, to say if something were to happen, we could get it done quicker. And a lot of that was FEMA money, obviously, but there's a lot of bond debt we're carrying right now that was for road projects. Some of them back when we
But
were just trying to keep our heads above water.
And, you know, the only thing that I'll say about that is bonding is not a fast process, right?
It's a good point.
So it's almost like, to me, in my mind, it's an oxymoron to say an emergency bond. Because it's gonna take so long to get your status certified as whether or not you're a AAA, you know, more or less if you wanna sell the bonds.
Well, and I think that's where the question came in previously when we were talking about it, is what's the difference between the bonding procedure on a bond and an emergency bond?
Right.
And
And
we
see,
never have really gotten an
And
answer.
I don't know enough about it,
So I don't either.
I do know you just can't just bond,
No, I,
as a county, I mean, or any entity, it takes a long
So
time.
you've gotta have a reason for it.
Sure, and you have to call up other people too, unless it's potentially as an emergency bond, I don't know. To me, that would be the only difference, is if it was an emergency bond, you might be able to circumnavigate a vote of the people, whereas you absolutely have to have one for a general obligation bond. You don't need one for a revenue bond though. So,
and what's the difference between a general obligation?
general
and revenue?
obligation is backed by the full faith and credit of the municipality.
Okay.
And a revenue bond is backed by revenues generated off of something. So a revenue bond would be issued to build like a waterworks plant, or if they would have built the rec center, or not the rec center, but the community center. If they would have issued revenue bonds, the funds raised off of the rec center would have paid for the bonds.
Yeah,
They'd been backed by that. But if the rec center wouldn't have brought in any revenues, those revenue bonds would default and they wouldn't be backed by anything else. Does that make sense?
oh, so more than anything, then it's a delineation for the person buying the bond to know what kind of,
That's
what kind of
correct.
safety there is in buying that bond.
That's correct, yes.
And I would assume then with a revenue bond, there's probably gonna be a higher interest rate then.
Yes, usually, because there's a lot more risk involved.
Yes.
Generally,
It's like playing the stock market versus buying a T-bill.
something like that, yeah. Not quite that extreme, but yeah, right.
That's a thought process then. Okay,
Do we feel comfortable keeping section 4 and retitling it section 2, or do we want to get rid of it?
I'm comfortable keeping it in there for now until we get a response back on some of those emergency procedures.
Okay.
Because either we need to include those procedures in here or reference it in.
Sure. Okay.
But
Yeah.
I like
that's
that.
that's kinda where I'm leaning to, we still need to get some answers on it.
I like the idea of having that as an option,
How
but I'm
are
not
we
sure it's
looking to
defined
do
well
this?
enough yet.
That's where she's been talking to the bondsman that we worked with in the past, and then he questioned the attorney, we still haven't gotten an answer
Oh,
back
that's
on
the
it.
attorney you're waiting for
Yeah,
that.
so-
Okay.
Maybe we could get an answer, and then we could,
I thought I'd have one
Yeah.
down before, but
yeah. So,
Okay.
we'll
So we'll keep
working on
it,
I
keep it
may
for
not
now.
be at the top of his list because, you know, I'm not paying him, so.
Right. What about section 5?
You could, I'll cut you check.
Oh, I have a
Just
typo
give
in
us the
there
answer.
too to catch up.
In section 4 or 5?
In section 4,
What about,
there's a typo.
oh,
That's okay, we'll fix that when we come back to it, after we get clarification.
Yeah. The C on county.
oh, should be capital.
Yeah.
Well, since the person typing it found their own typo.
Yeah.
Okay. So 6, we're gonna keep, we're just gonna relabel, so it's just a question of 5.
Yes, yeah, I think Adam was just talking, because I think we're gonna keep 6, so we already decided
Okay.
to.
So 2, are we just gonna leave until we,
Yeah.
You mean
Yeah.
the old 4?
We'll
Oh, yeah.
would be.
Yeah, which would be 2? Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
clarification, let's keep the numbering that we have in this document,
Until we talk about,
and we update the number in at the end.
right. Okay, so
Because we are gonna
old
go
section
back
5,
all
don't, Candy, don't change anything, 'cause it's gonna end up that way anyway.
Yeah.
Just in talking about it. Old section 5, lapse of
Old
appropriation,
section
do we
five.
need it or not?
That seems like something that would be in state code.
I would think so too.
Seems to me it's pretty self-explanatory.
I mean, is it
The
obvious?
fiscal year is
enough to
stated,
skip
the
it?
fiscal year is stated in century code unless we could set a different fiscal year, but why in the heck would you? That'd just be stupid. But you could.
The only thing that I'm curious about is, you know, if a department has more money that they wanted for a project or something, I know that there's a certain amount that they can generally carry over in their budget the next year. Is this changing that, or is that anything to do with that? I don't know. I just want to know if for sure we know that it's not different than. What?
He's thinking.
I know, it just gets so, like, I don't know if this is it, but it could be it, might be it, but it's so like far-fetched from it, we will never know.
Well, basically.
I don't think it'll ever be.
Well, I think basically it's just stating that if you appropriate, $10,000 for a line item,
forever.
it's not guaranteed next
Right.
year. That 10,000 can
Right.
turn into 5, it lapses at the end of the fiscal year on the 31st of December, and then the new budget takes place on January 1st. And any revenues then, just like we have now, that are left over, just roll back into the fund.
But isn't that just obvious?
Not necessarily,
Really?
because you can roll money out of other things into other things if you want to.
And see, that's what I'm saying about budget carryovers. You know, I want to make sure that we're doing something logical with that.
No, and in all honesty, again, carryovers, you could specify carryovers in here, but I think that should be a board policy. And we really have never had a policy at the board level about what we should be carrying over year to year. It's just kind of like, where we ended up at. You know,
Well,
and that's why, one of the things I had mentioned, this is kind of a divergence of what we're talking about, but to Candy is I would like when we budget this year to have the fund balances, projected fund balances at the end of the year. So we can go, okay, where are our fund balances gonna be at, and then we can shoot for a number. So that way, if you could
Okay, but
find out a balance
that's
or
not
whatever.
something that.
No, that's not something we need.
Right,
I'm
no,
just
but
saying.
I'm saying though, that then, that would need to be in the charter, correct?
That's what I'm asking.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I think it's
Did we just
specified that if it's a year, it's gonna lapse.
Well, there's certain accounts that, you know, if you have $5,000 left, it just rolls over into the next year.
Yeah, but it just sits in a
Like
fund.
the general fund accounts are all separated out into each individual offices.
Mhm.
So that goes to January, December.
Yep.
Okay, so then at the end of December, whatever all of those line items don't use, it just goes back into the big pot of the general
That
fund.
just goes to the general.
But then you go into like, I'm gonna use an example, like, district health. So if there's money left over at the end of the year, that just rolls over and stays in that account and goes, you know,
Into
so
the
it doesn't
district
all
fund.
roll back
District health fund,
into.
right? It doesn't
We
go to
still,
somebody else.
no, we retain the funds and hold them, but yeah, it just sits in their account
Yeah.
basically. It's almost like they have their own
But
bank
it
account,
just
but it's
doesn't,
sitting.
it doesn't all roll back into one big pot,
Right, that's what I meant.
except for the general fund stuff.
Okay,
Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah, it's,
all right.
yeah, because there's a
Okay.
certain,
The
there's a certain
question
amount of
would
mill
still
levies under the
be-
general.
yeah.
Right,
Go
but
ahead,
yeah.
ask me.
Well, no, I'm literally saying, to me, I don't know enough. And if I don't know enough, I'd rather not strike something that I don't know if it has an effect or not.
Yeah, and I'm on the other side, I say strike it, so we.
Every appropriation
Oh,
is
there
what it
you
is.
Oh, there you go. It's like messing with you.
Are we waiting on an answer on just old section 4 or this whole?
No,
Article.
section 5.
No, I'm sorry, I was going back, cause we've
You mean
kind
on
of
the
tabled,
emergency thing?
yep, we've tabled that
Yeah.
until we got word back. Are we just waiting on this old section 4 from him, or did you send over the whole article?
He got the whole document.
Oh,
But it's just,
But I zeroed in just,
oh, on
on
section,
the emergency of bond, yeah, the emergency bonding was the question, yeah.
okay. So he's not looking at section 5.
Unless we do the,
Well, and I'm looking at that second sentence, because the appropriation for a capital expenditure will continue in force until expended, revised, or repealed. We don't budget across years to appropriate for a capital expenditure. We have to budget year for year for the capital expenditure.
Right now, right?
Well, yeah, but that's how you're always gonna have to do it. Because you can't, if you can't say we're gonna build a building for $400,000 like we did the little search and rescue,
Right.
and then take a loan out for it and then not pay for it every year, but we don't,
I make a motion, we strike that.
yeah, it's easy.
I'll second it.
I like it.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Are there any further discussion?
To just strike section 5,
Correct.
I'm in favor of that, yes.
Okay. Any further
I
discussion?
submit, like everybody goes.
next,
All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
All right. Are we leaving section 6 in? If so, will somebody please make a motion to rename it budgeting procedures?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to rename section 6, now section 3, budgeting procedures.
Yes.
Andy, I want a spreadsheet about this, how we're figuring this
So
out.
can you reiterate, you said you don't have to do this right now per century code, but you guys do this?
No, we don't have a resolution. We just kind of set the procedures willy-nilly.
Yeah, there is,
Okay.
There is no- there is
so
no-
basically you're saying that now we can't shoot from the hip.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
so what do we want it in?
Budgeting procedures, so this one's gonna be called
Yeah.
budgeting procedures.
Oh,
And I'd suggest that I'm not gonna ask for it, but for this, for the one that's gonna be 1, 2, and 3.
Don't move the table.
Yeah, that's a rolling table.
Right here,
That one, yeah. Can we call
I've heard
that,
that's
can we call that administration of budget?
Do you guys have it in your budget to do a new picture?
No,
Just
no.
curious.
No, because pretty soon we're gonna have a whole nother commission and we never took a picture.
not,
Hopefully somebody can beat me.
Oh yeah, I guess we're not gonna have a
Not.
commission, are we?
You guys are running out of homes, aren't you?
I'm hoping somebody figures out how to write
so
it.
we
Hey, it's been
Dan,
done.
want a job?
budget.
Well, I'm unelectable.
But you guys set that in next
Yeah,
year.
budgeting procedures.
No, I like the job, it's just.
But the first one out, administration of budget, because I don't know what else to call that big one. Okay, Article 11, last article.
Or are we just making the change without voting? Is it
We did.
No, we did.
Oh,
We
no,
did.
oh, we were talking, sorry.
Oh,
Section 6, now section 3.
Yes, that's right. Okay, very good.
Great.
It's going to be named budgeting procedures.
Very good, okay. I'm losing
I'm paying
track of what we're
attention
doing.
now.
Hey, we're almost done, we're doing pretty well.
Well, this is the last one, everybody. Article 11, revenue authority and limitations. I think we need to add in section 1, collect property and
Collect property taxes,
That
fees
is,
and special assessments for benefits concurred. Did you wanted to add what?
Section 1.
You said I want to add. No, what were you gonna say, Lucas? What were you gonna say?
I want to make sure that I'm trying to figure out where it says we ask for a vote of the people for another tax. So I don't see where that's listed.
number 2.
It says two down.
Any ordinance or resolution submitted to the electorate
Approved by a majority.
must be approved, yeah. I guess we could put for the additional tax or whatever.
Yeah, no, I see that. I'm just, for commissioners implementing any new or additional tax not being
Wouldn't that
levied.
be in 1?
It probably should be put into 1.
That's what I'm asking, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we don't give ourselves the authority to ask for a sales tax as far as I'm aware.
No, I agree, I made the note, the sales tax question mark, that we should delineate sales tax.
Right, so that's what I was gonna ask to
But
add.
that's,
Did we already go over that belongs.
I don't remember, that's what I
We
made the
did
question.
lodging tax.
Yeah, we had the question about the lodging tax, but then we didn't delineate sales tax as an available option to ask.
I see.
No, I was just gonna say, so where would we put the word sales after new or additional sales tax not currently being levied?
Well, it'd have to be another sentence,
Oh, another sentence.
because this is saying that we have the authority by ordinance or resolution to collect the taxes we can, but you can't add a sales tax by ordinance or resolution. It has to go as a vote.
Yeah, I think it's, you would just put to levy and collect, property taxes, comma, sales taxes, comma,
I'll just add it in this.
fees, and special assessments.
But my concern is you can't do that because it says we'll have the authority by ordinance or resolution
Yep.
to
Yeah.
do those things. But it needs a vote.
You can't levy the tax by ordinance or resolution.
No, but it says right in number 1, limitations, no ordinance or resolution may be adopted by the Board of County Commissioners implementing any new or additional tax not currently being levied or assessed until referred to the people
Oh, there's another.
at a regular county election. Any ordinance or resolution must be approved by a majority vote.
It's already in there.
It's there.
It's in there, it's just trying to make it more explicit.
Okay,
Earlier.
that's fine if it's listed that way, okay, it's okay.
Under limitations.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
The only thing I would say under the limitations, it's inferred that number 2 is a limitation to the taxation. But maybe we should say any ordinance or resolution submitted to the electorate seeking additional taxation must be approved by a majority vote. Just so it's clarified,
Thinking what, did you just say?
seeking any additional taxation or something like that, just so it's
Additional
clarified. I mean, it's inferred that since it's in this section, you're talking about taxation, but just for clarity's sake. Yeah.
Seeking any additional or new taxation. Yes.
Could you just say additional, then is it just word some?
Holy cow, it's not. Let's not talk programming language here, right?
Additional tax.
That's not programming.
It sounded a little bit like programming.
I think that's programming.
It has to read correctly, so you're saying you can still levy property taxes the way you levy
Yeah.
property taxes currently, but if you wanna ask for any type of additional taxation other
Yeah.
than the property tax,
Yep.
you have to ask the people to do it.
Agreed.
We have to make that as easily read as is humanly possible.
Which would encompass a sales tax or a lodging tax or.
Well, if you explicitly put lodging tax up there.
So
Would
yeah,
that
'cause we
be
can only
under-
ask for the ones we.
Yeah, you have to, I
No, I
think,
know, but that's what I mean, that would be a generic statement that would encompass going after sales tax or lodging tax. We're still going to the vote of the people.
yes, but I think you have to delineate what taxes can be asked for.
Right.
You have to
Correct.
specifically state those
It
taxes.
says so in Century Code.
Yeah. It says in Central Code that
So we
you
need to
have to
add a
state that.
sales tax somewhere.
Yes,
Up top.
up top.
So, under
Under
taxes,
property taxes,
sales tax,
taxes.
fees.
Yeah, because we went through and looked at some of the other additional taxation possibilities, and they're not things we should be looking for.
Just as a question, and again, we don't have to go there, we can just write sales tax and then have it there. But just as a separate question, is it possible that we could write those forms of taxation allowed by North Dakota Century Code? So
I'm liking that idea.
So in
It's
other
really
words,
clever.
so then in that case, if the Century Code ever went back and was amended to include the ability to levy a lodging tax, we wouldn't have to go back and amend the home rule charter.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's a good way to state
you'd
it.
still have to put it on a ballot for vote, but.
Correct, yeah, no, it doesn't change
Yeah.
the process,
Doesn't
it's
change
just
the
saying those forms of taxation as
Yeah.
allowed by North Dakota Century Code.
Because I think they're going after that this legislative session, right?
Correct.
Somebody from Wilson's putting it in.
Yeah,
So then,
I don't know why.
if that were the case, would you say, would it read then, subject to the provisions of this article, Ramsey County will have the authority by ordinance or resolution of the Board of County Commissioners to levy and collect those taxes allowed by North Dakota Century Code, those taxes as allowed by North Dakota Century Code. Those forms of taxation as allowed by North Dakota Century Code. Again, I'm sorry, I'm telling you, okay?
I'm not gonna write until he's done.
One possible change to that is income tax.
We can't levy.
We can't do that.
That was included in Century Code, I thought.
Yeah, it is.
An income tax?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea how you levy
I don't know why
county
we never
wide.
do that.
Well, but, I mean, does it matter, because we're never gonna ask for that anyway, right? And I don't think that people would ever go for it, so, does it matter?
Well,
It's a security blanket for people that would be against additional taxation.
yeah,
Cause they're gonna look at that and go, oh, well, what if this changes but saying that all options that are on the state's table are on the table for us,
Say except income tax.
having that is, I mean, that's a wide open door that we really can't claim any sort of restraint with.
Well, that's fine, I'm just doing it for sake of clarity and ease, right?
And
Yeah.
the reason I'm putting that in there, the reason I would recommend putting that in there, is because then you have some, it's pretty easy to put in there at this point, but you at least have some boundary. Follow?
I follow.
Okay.
You guys wanna start collecting motor vehicle registration fees for us?
Yeah, so remember that list was fairly long, the different types, a lot of which we don't really have any interest in.
Well, yeah, I
To
mean,
do
Well,
it.
and it did list income tax.
Yeah.
I think the question that we're coming to now is if, for instance, the state ever gave the option to do a different type of taxation than is stated currently in Century Code, if you write it explicitly with this, and this, then those options aren't open in the
Yeah.
future. You would have to amend the document to then,
Right,
to
so,
then ask.
'cause my concern is for lodging tax specifically, I couldn't care less about anything
Of
else.
course.
But it's just one of those things where it may be very difficult to get this passed in a vote once it's been passed once, depending on, whereas if you listed it where you said, as allowed by Century Code, except for,
X, Y, Z.
right, then you could do it that way.
Yeah.
And so that way you'd be inclusive but excluding the ones that you don't like, and I'm fine with that, that's fine,
But if we're gonna be honest and say lodging tax is a primary focus of this revenue clause, then let's just put it in there. And,
we don't have the authority to ask for it.
Yeah. The
We-
state,
we-
that's
Then you have to strike, then that provision gets stricken immediately.
Yeah,
You
but-
challenge it straight.
included in general form in the excise taxes.
I don't think so. I've read the list, by the way.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to do it, to levy and collect, yeah, like you said, just put
Those forms of
those forms
taxation.
of taxation allowed by North Dakota Century Code, comma, excluding
Right,
income tax, and if there's anything else we wanna state there.
which.
So that way the document can flow with whatever whatever the options might be going forward.
I agree.
Cause I don't think we're ever gonna. The only tax that I think, the only possibilities that at least I can foresee would be if a specific sales tax to do a project or maybe a lodging tax or something of that
does
nature.
that need to be an exclusion?
What does?
There isn't a fee, yeah, we do have a fee for motor vehicle.
No, but we don't collect.
We don't collect a tax, so no.
So does that need to be an exclusion? Is that on the list right now of taxes that we can collect if we want
Yes,
to?
or,
So then
yes,
we would wanna say we wanna exclude that.
Well, do we want to
if we
do
want to exclude it, yeah.
I think so.
We're not going to be collecting tax on it.
No, right now it's stating that, if we don't add that in as an exemption, it's stating it could go to a vote to
Yeah.
collect a motor vehicle tax.
Yeah.
Well, but it could always go to a vote, I mean, they could vote to amend the charter
Yeah.
Right.
to have a motor vehicle tax if they wanted to, it's allowed by Century
True.
Code.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a question of whether or not you want to exclude it to start from, so it can't be asked for unless the charter's amended.
Why bring it up? Because I could put it on the forefront.
I'm starting over.
You're starting over, I like it.
Because if you don't put it in there, if this passes, it could go to a vote of the people right away to collect it.
Well, and I'm just thinking from, getting this document, not getting it elected, but getting it to pass. When you see a big wide open door like that, that's an easy target. Well, so let's at least close it a little bit, if we're gonna keep it general.
Excuse me. I'm just looking at it from the aspect of feasibility of collecting that tax. Why would you ever wanna go through the hoops of trying to collect something like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, and the thing is I feel like no member of the public is ever gonna wanna ask for that anyways, because it's almost irrelevant whether or not it's.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree, but if you just put it as an excluded.
Sure,
I don't-
and then
That's easy to
I remain
refer
fine
as
with
an
that,
excluded,
Okay.
yeah.
you know,
Just-
I wasn't arguing that we should have one, I just.
No, right,
No,
no.
So let's take a look at that list and exclude everything that we don't plan on using at this current point.
Okay,
I think that's fair.
Basically, everything allowed in century code minus these 3 or 4 items that we don't really care about.
Okay, can we revisit that at the next meeting?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Great. Is there anything else that needs to change with Article 11?
We're leaving it as is for now.
Looks that way.
yeah, we'll have to
We'll
look
have
at,
to
we'll look
revisit
at century code and see exactly what
Right,
is
yeah.
allowed and then exclude the things that are, we don't
relevant.
wanna have that are relevant, yeah.
Okay. Then there's one last motion before we see if there's any other business to come before the thing that I think someone needs to make. Will someone please make a motion that the articles be renumbered so as to reflect the number of articles that exist?
So,
So, seconded.
Motion and a second.
grammatical errors and renumbering.
Yeah. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. Is there any further business to come before the Ramsey County Home Rule Charter Committee? When's our next meeting?
You gotta do visitors and delegations first. It's on the agenda.
That is on the agenda.
Uh,
I think setting the meeting next meeting.
Alright, the reason I showed up is I figured it was something to learn about, and I have learned something today, and maybe I'll come to the next meeting and put in some 2 cents. But this is quite involved, let's say.
Yes.
And if you hope to get it past the public, you better get it less involved, I would say. As a first class, this is the first meeting I've been to, so that would be my recommendation.
I think if you'd have came 10 minutes earlier, you'd have heard exactly that.
We're trying to figure out how to make it as,
Well, there's your last point here, and I just wrote something down. Why use the century code and start excluding things? Why not just say, we want the ability to tax lodging, we want the ability to put a sales tax on? Leave it at that and be done if that's what you want.
Because, and I'll tell you why. Because North Dakota State Century Code does not allow for lodging tax right now for counties. And if we list that as one of the taxes that can be asked for, I believe that would leave that article open to legal attack.
That, not, I shouldn't start arguing, because I don't know enough, and I admit I don't know enough yet. But this is why home rule, this is what was brought up as I sat here and listened to you guys, ladies and guys, mind my French, but was the lodging tax. That was one of the first taxes I heard mentioned, okay? For or against it, doesn't matter. But that was one of the first things, and if it's not under century code, why refer back to century code then?
essentially because if you refer back to century code, if century code ever changes,
Yes.
the
that's
document
right.
is livable and readable then.
Right.
Because that is one thing that they're possibly looking at putting in to give counties the,
The ability to
Yeah.
do, right, and that would bring me to my next thing about the century code. Why leave, if you're gonna do home rule charter, why leave it up to century code to be referred to in this part of it? Because then you're letting Bismarck have control, and that kind of defeats the purpose of home rule charter, isn't it?
But we can't have any forms of taxation that are not allowed by century code.
I agree, yeah,
So
I
what I'm saying
understand that.
is if it was taken off of century code, we would lose it as well, even if we had it listed.
Yeah, Yeah, and I'll go back to my original point, instead of going to Century Code, why not just list the taxes that you are interested in doing?
And that's fine.
No, and
But, and that's for you guys to decide, I'm just putting my 2 cents worth, and I will admit, I don't know enough yet.
No, and I think your points are very good, Dan. It's just a
So-
matter of figuring out how to word it correctly,
Right,
so
right.
that it allows it to work going forward, but at the same time not making it so dang complicated that people are, you know,
Well,
like,
and
what's going on here?
and that's sort of what I feel that you've
Yeah.
done in this last, especially these last paragraphs. I mean, you have taken a lot of stuff out that I've been reading through that is gobbledygook, that doesn't need to be in there, and most of it I agree that you doing correctly that way, if you want to get it passed. But when, let's face it, this whole rule charter thing boils down to basically the ability, or not the ability, for the county commissioners to do a tax of some sort, to balance their budget or to do capital improvements or whatever needs to be done. So, but now I'll shut up and maybe let
No, I appreciate your
That's why,
thoughts.
yeah, that's why we're glad we have people show up and
but
give us input, because that's how we're gonna be able to draft this thing going forward, so people will
Yeah.
hopefully accept it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we've been working a lot, just don't work.
Okay, thank you for your input. Scheduling the next meeting.
Oh, gosh. Calendar in front of me here. Oh, let me slide this over.
I would suggest the second week in May, if possible. Be the 7th through the 11th. We could do Wednesday, May 9th at the same time.
Works for me.
All right, is there a motion to have the next meeting on Wednesday, May 9th at 1:30 PM?
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, motion carries. The next meeting will be on the 9th at 1:30. Is there any further business that needs to come before the formal charter committee?
I'll just make mention that I'll try my best to be here on that date, I'm not making any guarantees. And if not, if I'm out in the field and I've got the old auto steer, I'll call in.
Understood. Hearing no further business, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We stand adjourned. Thank you all.